Yo, today we're going to look at how to create this stylized stone tile material in InstaMAT. We're going to be focusing on the material, so if you're new to InstaMAT, you can check out my beginner's tutorial on InstaMAT's element graph. Link will be in the description. Let's get started. I have this basic material setup with a reroute node connected to the height channel of the material make, along with a height to normal and a height to ambient occlusion. I have the base color set to gray and roughness set to 1. Right click and hit preview. So now we can get started with creating our height map and connecting it to our reroute. To start off, I'm going to get a brick generator. To make the patterns into rectangles, I'm going to reduce the count in X. A ratio of 4 to 6 works well. Under offset, I'm going to change the distance to 0.5 to offset the tiles horizontally. I want to control the bevel manually after the brick generator, so let's drop it down to 0. In order to make out the separation of tiles under luminance, let's add some variance. Add an edge detect node. Set it to invert. Okay, this works well. We have the least possible gap between the tiles. Next, let's add a bevel node. Set the mode to invert. Lower the distance to 0.02. We can increase the softness to 0.3. This makes the transition smoother. Now, I want to add some variation to the tiles by randomizing the height of each tile. Normally, we can achieve that with a luminance variance, but to do it manually, we can use a flood fill node. This treats each separate tile as an individual element to perform various useful operations. Let's add a flood fill to average node. We are going to drive this with a cloud noise. Connect it to the input. You can play around with the values in the cloud's noise. Flood fill to average essentially takes the underlying pixels, averages them out, and assigns it to the relative tile. We do not want these black lines between the tiles, so to get rid of it, add a distance node. If it isn't working, it means the gap between your tiles is large. You can increase the distance value for that. Finally, let's add a levels node to control the variation. You can also go back and change the parameters in the cloud's noise to get different results. Blend this with the bevel node. Set it to multiply and change the opacity. Now for some edge damage, let's add a flood filter gradient. This is similar to the slope variance in the brick generator. Set the angle variance to 1. Alt and drag the node to duplicate. I will make 4 copies. I will change the angle values so that all of these are different. You can also change the seed. Now you can blend these and set the blend mode to minimum. I will daisy chain the remaining gradients. Now we want to push the white values out so the damage is limited to the edges. We can do it with a levels node, but we can get the same result with a histogram edit node, and it's a lot easier to control. Simply increase the master value and you can control the size. 0.93 looks good. Let's blend this with our setup. Set it to multiply around 50%. The damage looks very sharp. So we can fix that with a blur node set to a very low value. %6 looks good. Let's add some edge wear. We can use the slope blur. Set it to minimum. For the height, let's use a clouds noise at a scale of 4. I like to use a blur after the clouds. Around 10% looks good. You can blend it. Again with multiply. And opacity at 40%. Let's use a clouds with a blur to add some random surface wear. With the cloud scale set to 3, we can add a levels node to control it better. Let's blend this. As well with multiply at 70%. We can use some more details. Let's use a slope warp. We can try a pearl noise this time. Set the scale to a larger value like 24. Reduce the intensity of warp to 0.06. Blend this as well with the multiply. At 25%. As you can see, our method was fairly simple. We started with a base and added different layers of details and blended them. You can experiment with different nodes and add other details like cracks or damages. I like to finish the height map with an auto levels node to get the maximum range. Frame the nodes for easier management. Alright, now that we have the height map, let's create a simple setup for the roughness. I will change the preview to a cylinder so it's easier to see the lighting. Now add a levels node to the ambient occlusion. I want the crevices to be rough, so let's invert the black and white values. Darker values are more glossy and the lighter values are rough. It's too shiny right now, so let's bring the dark values back to gray. To increase the roughness in the crevices, you can increase the white value. I want to add some noise to the roughness. We can use spot 7 and blend it. I will use soft light for this at 50% opacity. Before we connect it to the roughness, I will use another levels node to control the range for the roughness. And we can frame this. You can hit C in the viewport to cycle through different channels and preview the roughness. M to go back to the material. Let's move on to creating the base color. I will start with a height to curvature map. Add a gradient map to this. I will go with slight purple tones. If you need to, you can use an auto levels node after the curvature map to get the maximum range. For the edge highlights, we can use a levels node with the convex output of the curvature map. Pull back the white handle to increase the intensity. Let's add a solid color with a lighter color and blend it. You can use the edge highlights for the opacity mask. We can set it to overlay at 60%. Now, I want to darken the cavities. Let's use a levels node from the ambient occlusion. Invert it and we can try to get a good contrast. Again, we will use a solid color with a darker color and blend it. Connect the opacity mask we created. Set it to multiply at 40%. Now, let's add some stains around the crevices. We can take the levels we just created and connect it to a slow blur. For the height, we will use a clouds noise. At a scale of 16. Another solid color. We will use dark blue for this. Set it to multiply at 35%. Let's create some larger surface stains. I will use Artistic 2 for this. Use a levels node to reduce the intensity. We can use a slope blur with this. Drive it with a clouds noise. Scale set at 32. Let's blend this. I'll use a dark desaturated color. Multiply and opacity at 60%. We can add some color variation. I want the material to have a stylized look, so let's add a brushstrokes node. Let's change some values. Count to 64. Scale to 0.75. Fiber count to 0.15. Increase the variation to 0.2. Increase the balance to 0.85. Up the contrast to 0.4. Now let's duplicate and run this through the slope blur, the clouds noise as well. Let's up the intensity for the slope blur between 250 to 300%. We can blend it with multiply. And change the color. To finish off the base color, I like to run it through a HSL node with which we can quickly make some large changes. Connect it to the base color. I'm gonna frame the base color nodes. Now you have complete control over the color that you can quickly change it to your liking by simply playing with the parameters. Variations by simply editing or replacing the brick generator at the beginning. Duplicate the brick generator and connect it to the edge detect. Set the scale to 5 and we have squares. You can also reset the offset. We can try out different pattern modes like herringbone or dumbbell. For another variation, we can add 3 box shapes with height and width set to 1. And a tile scatter. Set it to grayscale. And a pattern, let's change the count to 3 and connect the boxes. Let's add some luminance variance. Put the orientation variance to 0. Offset variance to 0. Increase the scale to 5. Change the offset mode to odd row and increase the X offset to 0.5. Unlock and increase the X offset variance. Now reduce the width of each box to a random value till you get a shape that you like. You can also change the seed, connect it to the edge detection. Now you have a setup with random size styles that you can have good control over. You can also go ahead and experiment with different patterns and generators. Well, here is the final output with some variation in shape and color. You can apply the same method for different materials and more complex colors. I will be making some time lapses for these type of materials. You can subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to catch those videos. And thank you for watching.